Hello, my name is Wayne Mitchem. I'm going to talk with you about weed management programs in Muscadine vineyards today. And when we get started here, a couple of things I want to talk to you about that we need to really address up front. There's going to be some of the supply challenges that are facing us here in 2022. As many of you maybe already know, Riesling availability essentially it's unavailable. Just to be very specific. Whether you're using Surfland or a generic product, it's unavailable. The alternative for us in this situation is going to be Prowl H2O. They've made some modifications to the label. It's going to be very essentially where we've used a Riesling or Surfland in the past. Prowl H2O is going to be the substitute there at the same rate essentially. Glyphosate and glufosinate are going to be limited in supply. Because of that, non-selective post-emergence herbicides are going to be more expensive. If you price glyphosate, you already know this. Glufosinates went up. Don't expect paraquat not to do the same. Basically a supply and demand situation. And if you go to pricing, I think you're going to notice in general increased costs for all our pest control products anyway. There are some formulation changes. Gramoxone was a 2-pound material. It was Gramoxone 2.0 or SL 2.0. Now they've made a more concentrate formulation Syngenta has, which is going to be in line with what the generic products have been doing for a number of years now. So essentially the use rate for whether it's the branded or the generic is going to be the same. It's going to be 1.7 to 2.7 pints per acre. Typically, we're looking at somewhere around 2 pints per acre is what would be applying of this, of course, with a non-onyx surfactant included with that. The other thing you're going to run into this time is, for a number of years, there have been some restrictions and additional use requirements being phased in for utilizing paraquat products. The final step in that was any kind of packaging, any kind of paraquat that's packaged in less than 120-gallon quantities had to be in a closed system packaging handling type product or container, I should say. And because of that, we have basically 2.5-gallon products that now have a new lid. And in order to use those lids, you have to have in order to use that 2.5-gallon material, you have to have an adapter on your herbicide applicator tank where you turn that 2.5-gallon jug upside down, you lock it in place, and you have a quarter turn to dispense that paraquat directly into your tank without measuring it out into a cup. And those 2.5 Chateau EZ is a new formulation of Chateau. It's going to basically replace the old Chateau, which was a water dispensable granule. The Chateau EZ is like the Tuscany SC generic or liquid formulations. The use rates are 6 to 12 fluid ounces, which is not a change really, in that we're using fluid ounces here with the liquid formulation, and the old use rate for the dry product was 6 to 12 dry ounces. So it's going to be a nice, easy conversion for you there on rate. And if you've been using, 6 to 8 ounces of the dry material, you're just going to use that same amount in fluid ounces now. We're going to talk a little bit about herbicide options and timings and try to go through this without taking too much time here. In newly planted options, pre-emergence wise, we've really got two choices. We can use Chateau or we can use Prowl H2O. And the reality is of those two choices, the Chateau is the better, the more broad spectrum, the longer residual product. It's very safe to use. It does require having grow tubes around those young vines, but if you're establishing a vineyard, you're going to need to do that anyway, because one of the most important things during establishment is preventing weed competition and making sure that we get this vineyard off to a good start and maximize the growth of these young vines in those first couple formative years, so you can bring that vineyard in production as soon as possible. So starting off with a good pre-emergence herbicide program is essential that we get started right. And again, Chateau would be the one of choice. You know, we can use our non-selective post-emergence products, the glufosinate, paraquat, glyphosate. Of course, they're going to require grow tubes as well. And if we have to deal with grasses, especially something like Bermuda grass, clethodim, post, or fusilade or options, control nothing but grasses, post-emergence, of course, for those perennial grasses. And if we're having to deal with those, you know, fusilade or clethodim is going to be my product of choice there in a perennial, trying to control something like a Bermuda grass. Johnson grass, you know, the post would be a good option for you. Just mention here that those grow tubes, ideally, I like to use the ones you can remove at the end of the season and then put back on the following year. I do think 2 years of protection is important. You know, most of our herbicide labels don't require 2 years of protection, but I think it's a good idea to put those in place and take them on and off, and take them off in the fall and then put them back on the following year, the second year of that vineyard's life. You know, we want to start weed free in a newly planted situation. There's no question that you know, if you don't start weed free, you're behind from the get-go. So we need to make sure we're going into a bare soil surface the day you plant. We don't need any weeds that are 1 or 2 inches tall, because they will get large in a hurry and become competitive. Once we you know, you plant your vines, you go in there and put the grow tubes, apply those. Then ideally, I'd like for a rainfall event to occur, and then we come in and do a directed application of 6 to 8 ounces of Chateau. And generally, 6 to 8 ounces of Chateau is going to give us 60 to 80 days of residual control. We typically think of using primarily 6 ounces in most situations. But if you're on a little heavier soil, you know, 8 ounces is going to do a little better job for you. But if you're very coarse textured, if you're on a loamy sand, you can't use above 6 ounces anyway. But if morning glories are a problem and your soil texture will allow you to do it, 8 ounces is going to be a little better choice for you. But again, we have to be careful with muscadines. With muscadines being grown, you know, somewhat, you know, a lot of them grown in coastal plain areas. We have to be cognizant of the fact that, you know, some of these soils may be a little sandy to get that 8 ounce rate in a newly planted situation based on the restrictions we have on our label. Once that control from that initial application begins to break down and emerging weeds get, you know, 2 to 3 inches tall, we come back with a second application of 6 to 8 ounces of Chateau with paraquat or glufosinate. And that generally will take us well into the summer and does a really good job for us in terms of maximizing the growth and dealing with these annual weeds that can be so competitive. You know, we basically know that in order to maximize vine growth, we have to keep these newly planted vineyards weed free through July. Weeds that are emerging in August and September really are not that competitive with these young vines. But in order to maximize growth, we do need to keep these vines weed free through July. Perennial grasses need to be dealt with. Let's talk about established vineyards. You know, we've got a number of pre-emergent herbicides that are currently registered for use in those vineyards. And I haven't listed all of them, but here's ones that have worked well, perform well, and give us good control, either alone or either in combination with something else. For example, the Prow H2O is not something that I'm going to recommend you put out without something going along with it. It's something that we'd expect to tank mix with either, you know, Simazine or Zeus Prime or Sulfuron. And whereas Chateau is more of a standalone product, as is Allion. So just keep that in mind. You know, when we look through these products here, you know, obviously the Prowl and the Chateau can be used on any age vine. One thing I would like to mention though with the Chateau is that, you know, you can only use it with hooded application equipment, and we cannot tank mix it. We don't recommend tank mixing with glyphosate after bud break. But if you're growing fresh market grapes, Chateau cannot be applied after bud swell. So keep that in mind. If you're growing muscadines for wine grape use, we can basically use this on over in the summer and a sequential type application after bud break. But if you're growing grapes for fresh market, you can't put it out after bud swell. So please keep that in mind with Chateau. With Simazine, you know, very specifically mentioned don't take mixed with flumioxazine, and you should be using, with Zeus Prime, you should be using hooded application equipment as well. We don't have the restriction we have with Chateau about the fresh market versus grapes grown for wine, but you still need to use hooded application equipment to prevent any movement. And the reason for that is, you know, both these products have some post-emergence activity, and if you were to get any type of inversion to take place, or if you get wind drift for that matter, they do risk the potential of causing some problems to the finish on the fruit and potentially speckling it. Simazine, vines have to be established 3 years. Zeus Prime 2 years. Sulfuron, they can be established for 1 year. And then I'll mention Aleon, very good residual herbicide, a lot of residual activity. Vines have to be established for 3 years or longer. But if anybody happens to be on listening, this product is not available for use in Florida or Georgia on grapes. So please keep that in mind. You know, when we talk about timing herbicides in established vineyards, we've got a couple different options. And as far as programs, and I think it's very important that you look at your situation and you see what can work for you. All these programs, excuse me, are designed to time these herbicides to first of all to get you the longest residual you can late into the summer and into the harvest period. And two of the programs are better than the other. So let me just go with start with the fall application, post-harvest type application of a pre-emergence herbicide, and then following that up with a late spring application of another pre. And this program, you know, it keeps you weed free through pruning, helps with maximizing radiant heat benefits during spring freeze events. Although that's not as big a concern in muscadines as it may be in some other grape crops. The next program is a delayed pre, and basically that program begins now with going in here in March and doing a non-selective post-emergence herbicide application and essentially killing all the winter annual weeds that are there now, and then waiting till the soil warms up enough and you begin to get some emergence of summer annual weeds, things like lamb's quarter, crabgrass, and maybe smartweed would be some of the earlier emerging type species that you'd see in summer annuals. And then at that time, you go back in with another non-selective post when those weeds are 2-3 inches tall with a pre-emergence herbicide. Now, this program offers the shortest, or doesn't offer residual control as late into the fall as the previous one or the one I'm going to mention next, which is a winter-summer split, which is essentially the same thing as with the delayed pre. We're going in now with a non-selective post-emergence herbicide, but we're putting a pre out with it. And the pre-emergence that we'd put out with it now generally pushes back the need for a second pre-emergence herbicide until, probably June, even late June, potentially even early July. And the further we can push that second pre-emergence herbicide application back, or the better residual or the longer residual control we're going to get into the fall. And that can be important as with muscadines being harvested as late and as longer season crop as they are, being harvested as late as they are into the fall. That may be something that is very desirable for you. And again, the fall followed by late spring and the winter summer splits are the two that gives you the greatest residual into the fall summer split. That application would typically go out anytime in late October through Thanksgiving. We'd go in with glufosinate, which is Rely, or a generic alternative to Rely. or paraquat with a pre-emergence herbicide. Now, the two pre-emergence herbicides that I think would perform best for you here would be either Simazine or Chateau. Of the two of those, the Chateau is going to be the one that would give you the longest residual and the cleanest ground into the next spring. Ideally, we'd like to get into late May or early June with this fall application. And Chateau is going to be of the two herbicides, the Chateau is going to be the one that's most capable of doing that for you. So when we get to late May, early June, we follow that. When those summer annual weeds get a couple inches tall, we follow that up with glyphosate, glufosinate, or paraquat, whichever one you choose, with another pre-emergence herbicide or some combination of pre-emergence herbicides. Now, if you're in a situation where you've got wine grapes, you could use Chateau because we can't use it in fresh market grapes after bud break. So that's the only option. You use Chateau as long as you're producing your grapes is going to wine. Simazine at 2 to 3 quarts plus Prowl at 2 to 4 quarts. If you're in the coastal plain, obviously that rate's going to be on the lower end because of the soil texture restrictions on the label. Just look at that, please. Rimsulfuron at 4 ounces, tank mixed with Prowl at 2 to 4 quarts. Zeus Prime at 12 to 15 fluid ounces with Prowl at 2 to 4 quarts. Or another option would be to use Alion at 3.5 fluid ounces. With our delayed pre-timing, basically we're talking about going in mid-March with that burn down. And we're talking about, going in with glyphosate or glufosinate, whichever one you choose. I hadn't mentioned this previously, but this might be a good time to do it with glufosinate. We typically look at using ammonium sulfate fertilizer with that at 8 pounds, per 100 gallon spray solution. And if you're timely here, if we're talking about dealing with weeds that are 3-4 inches tall or less, 32 fluid ounces works really great, even though the minimum use on the label says 48 fluid ounces. We've done quite a bit of work with 32 fluid ounces of Rely and other generics, and it works perfectly fine, so long as you don't make the weeds get too tall. Then the first or second week of May, whenever the soil temperatures warm up, you go see summer annual weeds beginning to emerge and they're 2 to 3 inches tall. We go back through with our glyphosate or glufosinate or paraquat, plus a pre-emergence herbicide or some tank mix. Here again, Simazine 2 to 3 quarts, depending on the texture of your soil, that's going to affect your use rate there. With a Prowl product at 3 to 4 quarts per acre. Chateau at 12 ounces. I'll mention again, if you're growing grapes for fresh market, that's not going to be an option for you because you're going to be after a bud swell, obviously. Zeus Prime, tank mixed with Prowl H2O. Again, Alion at 3.5 fluid ounces would be an option. Rimsulfuron at 4 ounces plus 3 to 4 quarts of Prowl. For our winter-summer split, we make that initial application here in mid-March with a non-selective post and a pre-emergence herbicide. And again, that's going to basically keep us weed-free until we get into June. And when those emerging weeds get 2 to 3 inches tall, and in late June, we come back with another pre-emergence herbicide or a follow-up application of the same one potentially in combination with glyphosate or glufosinate. Both these materials, with both these times, of course, we're going to be including a non-selective post product with it. Paraquat would be an option as well. I would prefer to use glyphosate or glufosinate in the initial one, and then in the second one, if you wanted to use paraquat, you could use that at the late June or early July timeframe. As far as pre-emergent herbicide options go, we've got a couple of choices here. If you're in the wine grape situation, again, we can use Chateau sequentially, 6 to 8 ounces in March, followed by another 6 to 8 ounces in late June. With Zeus Prime, we can use 10 to 12 fluid ounces plus 2 quarts of Prowl in that March time frame. Here in this March time frame, And then follow that up with our late June application of the same thing again. So we're making sequential applications of that. Sulfuron at 4 ounces with 2 quarts of prowl. Again, that applied in March, followed by the second application of the same tank mix again in late June, roughly, or whenever that initial application begins to fail. And then another option would be use Chateau at 10 to 12 ounces here in March. Here, while things are, we're still not at the point where at bud break, we would still use it regardless of whether you were wine grape or fresh market. And then with our second application, come through with Sulfuron just by itself, which is a matrix Salida approved product. Or we could use Chateau at 8 ounces and follow that up with Allion at 3.5 ounces. Would be another good probe. Again, the Chateau, we put it out in March. And when we come back on our second trip, we use the Allion. Just want to talk a few minutes here about Bermuda grass control and Johnson grass control for that. But regardless of which one you have, I think especially if you have Bermuda grass, you have to be extremely concerned about the competition and the impact it can have on your grapevine growth as well as your grape production. Bermuda grass is probably the most competitive weed that we have to deal with in fruit crops. And if you want to control Bermuda grass, we have to make an initial application of either post or fusillade when we have 4 to 6 inches of new growth on that Bermuda grass as it's coming out of dormancy. We put out the herbicide in combination with a crop oil concentrate at basically a gallon per 100 gallon of spray solution. And then we wait for regrowth to occur. And we make a second application when we get 4 inches of regrowth. But it's critical that the second application, 1, be made, and 2, be made when the Bermuda grass, or for that matter, the Johnson grass, has begun to regrow. If it's not regrowing, it's not going to take that herbicide up, and it's not going to do what it should, because it's going to be still stressed from that initial herbicide application. So we wouldn't get a good utilization from the second trip through if we put it out before we actually have regrowth. For Johnson grass needs to be 10 inches tall for our initial application, coming out of winter and dormancy, and then that second application needs to be when you got 8 inches of regrowth. If yellow nut sedge is a problem, the Zeus Prime is an excellent material for controlling yellow nut sedge. Sulfuron also gives you some partial control or suppression, so that would be an option for you as well. With that, I'm going to basically conclude my presentation, and hopefully we'll have some questions, and we'll answer those and address those as whatever they may be. Thanks.